Anna live stream. A pleasant good morning to one and all. Today we are celebrating National Education Day. So Institution Innovation Council in association with A.B. Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences warmly welcome you all for a talk on contribution of private universities to Indian higher education ecosystem by Dr. Sandeep Shenoy. So to begin with National Education Day, how it started. So it is the day celebrated to commemorate the birth anniversary of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who was the first education minister of independent India. It was on 11th September 2008, the Ministry of HRD decided to commemorate his birth anniversary on this day. Azad, during his tenure as an education minister, promoted research in Eastern learning and literature and set up 3 academies to develop the fine arts. Some of the important boards commissions set up by him were the University Grants Commission, All India Council for Technical Education, that is AICTE, Kharagpur Institute of Higher Education and Secondary Education Commission. He strongly advocated women education and free and compulsory primary education up till the age of 14 for all. The day is also seen as an occasion to remember Azad's contribution in laying the foundation of the education system in an independent India and evaluating and improving the country's current performance in the field. Today is a very apt day for me to talk about national education policy as well. National education policy, that is 2020, was put forth on 20th July 2020. Now this NEP 2020 replaces the national education policy of 1986. So it was after 34 years, India has decided to change the education system. Now, the vision of this NEP is to develop India-centric education system that contributes directly to transforming our nation sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high-quality education for all. Curriculum have been tweaked to get into the picture the financial literacy, artificial intelligence, use of regional language and mother tongue into the curriculum. Karnataka has become the first state in the nation to issue the order with regard to the implementation of this National Education Policy 2020. With this brief introduction, I warmly welcome you all once again for the program. I take immense pleasure in inviting our beloved dignitaries, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Nitte deemed to be University, Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, sir. Our speaker for the day, Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, Head, Department of Commerce and Director, Compliance of Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Manipal. Professor Dr. Sri Niketan, President in Institution Innovation Council, Nitte deemed to be University. Professor Dr. U.S. Krishna Nayak, Principal of A.B. Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences, and all the members of our Nitte fraternity to this event. I now invite our beloved Professor Dr. U.S. Krishna Nayak, Principal Sir of A.B. Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences, to welcome the gathering.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anita. A very good morning to each one of the dignitaries and all the participants of this lecture on this National Education Day being commemorated by the Nitte deemed to be University. The topic for today's lecture is contribution of private universities to Indian higher education ecosystem. I think this topic is very, very aptly selected, and so is the speaker of the day, Dr. Sandeep Shenoy. I warmly welcome, first of all, our beloved and most respected Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, sir, for this function. He is going to be the chief guest of this program and also give his opening remarks before the start of the lecture. As our speaker, we have none other than Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, the Director Compliance and Head of the Department of Commerce from Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Institution of Eminence deemed to be University. And he is going to talk to us today, as I just said, on contribution of private universities to Indian higher education ecosystem. Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, sir, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and spending this 1.5 hours with us. We really deem it our privilege and pleasure to have you amongst us today. Thank you very much. I would also like to welcome the other senior functionaries of the university, Professor Dr. Alka Kulkarni, our dynamic registrar, Professor Dr. Muditaya, the Pro Vice Chancellor, and all the other dignitaries of the university, all faculty members, heads of various institutions, faculty members, and of course, the students of all the constituent colleges who are participating in this National Education Day celebrations. I will not take much more of your time, but I would have to congratulate our Vice Chancellor for, should I say, always supporting us and encouraging us to conduct and such programs. And on this National Education Day, very rightly, we are deemed to be a university. As a deemed university and center of higher education ourselves, today, I think we have selected the right topic and the right person for this lecture. And I wish all of you a very fruitful next 1.5 hours, or enriching 1.5 hours of interaction with Dr. Sandeep Shenoy. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Shetty Ketan, sir, for giving me this opportunity, or the AB Shetty Dental College, to host this program or organize this program on behalf of the Nitte University. And I'll be failing in my duty if I do not acknowledge the role of the, if I may say, the charming Dr. Renita, who is hosting us today for the program. And thank you very much, and wish you all a very day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now call upon our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, sir, to say a few words.
Very good morning. The Dean of the Dental School, Professor U.S. Krishna Nayak, and President of the Institution Innovation Council, Nitte, Dr. Shetty Ketan, and very distinguished speaker for the day, Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, Director Compliance and Head of the Department of Commerce from Manipal Academy of Higher Education, and Renita, the coordinator of this today's webinar, and officials of the university and faculty and students and the participants in this very interesting webinar organized by Institution Innovation Council of the university in collaboration with the AB Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences. As the Dean said, I should congratulate the organizers and the President of the Council for selecting this topic, contribution of private universities to Indian higher education system. And the speaker for the day, Dr. Sandeep, is a very appropriate person to speak about the contribution of the private sector for Indian education, because he is hailing from the very renowned institution of the country, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. The contribution of Manipal of higher education to the Indian education ecosystem is immense, and rightly they are named the Center of Excellence by the Ministry of Human Resources, now the Ministry of Education. I deem it my privilege to participate in this day celebration to commemorate the birthday of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad. I think many of you will not be knowing his contribution. And Renita rightly said, he has contributed not only for elementary education of the country, he is the person who has started, he has got he's a visionary. He started IITs, particularly IIT Kharagpur was started during his tenure. And he is instrumental in starting to pioneer institutions, University Grants Commission and AICT for technical education. And that shows the vision of this man for Indian education. And the agenda of this day is how to improve the Indian education system. As you all know, education is the primary need of a person. And without literacy, no country can progress. If you go through the statistics, I was surprised to know that the Indian literacy rate was 12% during independence, 1947. And now we have reached, according to 2020 statistics, we have reached to 77%. What a tremendous growth. And thanks to the successive governments who have worked for this, and they have made it, and our constitution has made it the fundamental right. Education is the fundamental right, and it has been bestowed on all the citizens of the country. Now, the right of education, and it has been made free up to the age of, I think, understand, up to 14 years. This has added really tremendous growth into our education. According to the architect of this day, Maulana Abdul Qasim, education should build the capacities of the spirit of inquiry, creativity, entrepreneurial skills, and moral leadership among the students. And they should become the role model for the students. I think what a wonderful statement he gave on the during his tenure. We know that we have got more than 1,000 universities in this country, and more than 50,000 colleges. And definitely we have created a huge, large knowledge society. But where we have failed, according to me, we have failed to convert this knowledge into skills, wisdom, innovation, and entrepreneurship, which is the need of the hour. As Nitte said, the new education policy is definitely a silver line in the dark clouds, which was passed by the Government of India after a deliberation for more than 3 decades. And definitely it's going to transform Indian education system, which is very crucial for our youth to compete globally. The policy is based on the pillars of equity, quality, affordability, accountability, and it aims to transform India into a knowledge superpower. That's according to our visionary Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji. The national education policy definitely it is intended to make more experiential, holistic, flexible, and research-driven. Definitely it will enable the students to learn at their own pace while building on capabilities for the jobs for the future. That's what is required. Unfortunately, we didn't create. We want more job creators, not job seekers, and make these job creators. They require entrepreneurial skills. Unless they got entrepreneurial and innovative skills, students cannot be job creators. National education policy is according to me, it's very highly ambitious. And the successful implementation of this policy is definitely a challenge, but calls for simplification of decision-making process. That's what is happening in our country. We are hindered, we are obstructed by the lack of policy decisions. And that has to be created. And reprioritization of a budgetary allocation is what is needed. One of the highly ambitious aim of our new education policy is increase the growth enrollment ratio in higher education by 2035. And they intend to make it almost double the gross enrollment ratio. But definitely it requires huge investment, both in terms of infrastructure and human resources. This cannot be achieved only by the government, according to me. It requires contribution from private players. And according to the statistics, at present, government spends less than 3% of GDP on education. It's not at all sufficient. In spite of repeated requests by various committees and organizations to increase it to 6%, still we are in that range, 3%. And even the new education policy also has recommended to increase it to 6%. So it requires a lot of money and resources. Still, even though the primary education and secondary education is given free by the Government of India, according to the statistics, more than 20% of students still study in private unaided schools for various reasons. This may be still, it's higher in higher education, particularly professional courses, according to me. And I don't have the exact statistics, and Sandeep will be able to enlighten us regarding the role of private entrepreneurships in higher education. the experiment of developing public-private partnership, that is one of the recommendations by various bodies, but unfortunately it has failed and failed to succeed because probably again due to lack of clarity and a lot of uncertainty about the guidelines of government guidelines. And people are not very sure what will be the future of this public-private partnership. Both public and private participation in education, they got their own merits and demerits. Another important complaint against the private tech sector is that they charge exorbitantly, they operate with the profit motive, and they dilute the quality of education due to lack of regulatory oversight and restricted access to the meritorious students because of the higher fees which they charge. But according to it, it's not always true. As a result of increased competition among the higher education institutions, Sandeep will definitely will be able to highlight that the private partners also giving very high quality education with the competitive fee structure, and involvement of the private management, private sector is definitely will enhance the quality of education in India and investment in education sector. I hope the talk by contribution by Sandeep about the contribution of higher university to Indian higher education in the education ecosystem will be really informative, particularly during this period of implementation of new education policy. People are eager to hear about this talk by Dr. Sandeep. I hope all of you will carry very pleasant experience, pleasant memories of this webinar conducted by Institute University Council in collaboration with our dental school. Thank you, my colleagues from the dental school and Institute University Council for organizing this webinar. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. So before we begin the talk, as a token of appreciation, I would like to display a memento for Dr. Sandeep Shenoy. Kindly accept our memento, sir. I would now like to introduce our guest speaker for the day. Dr. Sandeep Shenoy holds a BE with honors in civil engineering, Masters in Financial Management from Mumbai University, Master of Philosophy in Management from Alagappa University, and doctoral degree from Mangalore University. He has about 7 years of industrial experience and about 21 years in academics. He is currently functioning in dual capacity as the head, Department of Compliance, Department of Commerce, and the Director, Compliance of Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Manipal. He is the chairman of Doctor Advisory Committees under Department of Commerce. He is also an approved PhD guide of MAHE University. Under his able guidance, MAHE University has won several prestigious awards, such as the Ramakrishna Bajaj National Quality Award, FICCI Award in multiple categories, ASSOCHAM Award in multiple categories, etc. He has published 37 research papers in various reputed international and national journals. He has received the Best Paper Award at an international conference organized at said Business School, University of Oxford, United Kingdom in 2017. He has also published several books and articles in his research interest. He has organized many workshops and international conferences to bridge the industry-academia gaps, leading to the finest outcomes benefiting all the stakeholders. During his stint in industry, he had the privilege of working with Shapoorji Pallonji, a reputed conglomerate in different capacities, and handled many of their prestigious projects in Mumbai, such as the Bharat Diamond Bourse, American School of Bombay, Nelco Technopolis Park, and Procter & Gamble. He has received recognition as Best Quality Examiner in Leadership Role from Indian Merchants Chamber as a team leader for Ramakrishna Bajaj National Quality Award applicant assessment. Sir, kindly accept our memento as a token of appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now invite our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, to deliver the talk.
Thank you, Dr. Renita. I'll just share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, am I clearly audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so very good morning to all of you. Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari,
Local address can
Honorable Vice Chancellor, pardon, there is some disturbance.
Yes, sir. Just give me a minute. Yes, sir. You can.
Yeah, very good morning to all of you. Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Nitte, Dept to be University. Professor U.S. Krishna Naik, Principal and Dean, A.B. Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences, Nitte University. Professor Dr. Srini Ketan, President, IIC, Nitte Deemed University. Professor Renita, IIC Coordinator from A.B. Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences. Invitees, officials, attendees, and all those who are present here. A very good morning to all of you again. It is my pleasure to be a part of this National Education Day celebrations organized by Nitte, deemed to be University. Let me begin with a quote which I think Professor Bandari just mentioned, and it is very, very appropriate. Educationists should build the capacities of the spirit of inquiry, creativity, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial and model leadership among students, and become their role model. So this is very apt when he said this in the late 50s, but something which is very relevant as on today, and it has been happening, as you can see. A lot of world leaders, especially from Microsoft, or if you see some of the leading multinationals like Google and all, have CEOs who have actually studied in the Indian ecosystem. And that's where it makes a lot of difference, and a lot of entrepreneurs have come up out of this ecosystem. And that's why it's very important that educationists should work in this direction. And well, the quote is very, very relevant even on today. When Professor Krishna Naik approached me for this talk, I was just wondering what can be a suitable topic for this particular day. And I just asked him what would be your expectations as Nitte. What are your expectations? So he mentioned that the talk should be appropriate in terms of the day occasion, and at the same time it should also meet the requirements of Nitte, which is a multidisciplinary deemed to be university, considering the various disciplines, the faculty, staff, students who are part of this organization. So keeping this in mind, I suggested this topic of contribution of private universities to Indian higher education ecosystem, which I thought would be an appropriate topic on this occasion. At the same time, this talk will also highlight some of the aspects of National Education Policy 2020, and also guide the audience in terms of understanding Indian education system better. So I would just start with few lines on the National Education Day, though it may be repetitive, since it is very important that we should remember this Maulana Abul Kalam Azad on this day. So I thought we should have some more deliberations on this. Apart from that, the talk will cover developments in higher education, challenges in Indian higher education ecosystem, need for increased involvement of sector, and then I will conclude with some remarks, then followed by any question and answers as appropriate. So So I'll just run through this because some of these have already been informed by Nitte. So basically, as all of you know, this is an occasion where we remember Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. It's his birth anniversary. And he was the first education minister of independent India. So that is very important. He was known for as a freedom fighter, a journalist, reformer, and committed to nation building. And this was in 2008 that the government, the Ministry of MHRD, currently known as Ministry of Education, gave this directive of celebrating November 11th as the National Education Day. And on this day, we recognize the contribution of this great person in terms of his contribution to nation building. As you all know that he has been a part of the contribution in terms of encouraging fine arts in the form of pre-academies like Sangeet Natak Academy, Sahitya Academy, and Lalit Kala Academy. And also he has promoted Eastern literature. Apart from also he was involved in compilation of technical terms in Hindi on a large scale. So as you can see that way back in the 1950s, some of the things which we are now talking about in the national education policy about offering technical programs in the local languages, and that is how it was started way back in the 1950s at the time of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. And UGC was inaugurated in the year 1953 on the 28th of December, when he was the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Education Minister and Natural Resources and Scientific Research Minister. So he had these dual portfolios, and this was the time when several other institutions like AICT, Jamia Millia Islamia, and IIT Kharagpur were also initiated. So you can see that he was instrumental in starting of several key institutions and commissions in the country, which has been the foundation of education system, the education ecosystem of India. So even modern day IITs and faculty of Delhi University was his brainchild. And he was conferred Bharat Ratna in 1992 for his contribution as a freedom fighter and an educationist, a strong advocate of education for women and compulsory primary school education till the age of 14. And he served as an education minister from 1947 to 1958, as it was one of the most turbulent times after getting independence. And as Professor Bhandari mentioned, the level of literacy was very low at that point of time. The infrastructure was a big challenge. And during those days, setting up institutions, setting up a system, and then progressing along was quite a challenge, which he took up as an education minister and did it very well. He passed away in 1958. On this day of National Education Day, normally education institutions celebrate it in the form of webinars, in the form of workshops, talks, and educate the audience, the students, the society in terms of the contribution of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad to the field of education, to the nation building. And it's important that we all remember him on this particular day, his contribution, and take it further in terms of evaluating ourselves where we are. And accordingly, we work towards his vision of making India one of the best education systems in the world. Now I come to the next part of my talk, which is developments in higher education. So in the first 50 years after independence, basically there was a thought process. The Indian education system will be led by the government role, more of government involvement in education rather than private players. So there was an expectation that education is a state subject, and definitely responsibility is on the government. But over a period of time, a lot of private education institutions have come up, and they are playing a significant role. So if you look at our status in at the time of somewhere in the 50s, we were at 28 universities at that point of time. And now we have grown up to 1,013 universities. So there's a monumental growth in terms of the number of institutions, the universities which have come up. And a significant number of these universities are in the private sector. So 481 private universities are there, and catering to the needs of almost 40 million students. So the number of students have also increased. So the expectations of the students, the number of students to be catered to have also increased. So the country has witnessed a lot of development in the area of education over the last 7 decades. During the time from the independence till now, there were several reports, policies which have come up in the education sector, and I would not touch much upon them, but would like to refer them. So we had the Radhakrishnan Commission report in 1948-49, the Kothari Commission report in 1964-66. The main important part was the National Program on Education in 1986 and the Program of Action of 1992, which were focused on access and equity of education. And now the agenda of the same has been now added up in the National Education Policy 2020, which was released last year in July in the Parliament, and then subsequently on August 7th, our Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Narendra Modi, he initiated this with all the education institutions. So when you look at the National Education Policy of 2020, it is focused on the Sustainable Development Goal 4 of the United Nations, which is in sync with the Agenda for Sustainable Development for 2030. And this was accepted by India in 2015. So in this particular goal, it is for providing inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So this is the entire focus of this policy. The words in this policy which are very important for us to understand is inclusive, equitable, and quality. So quality education has to be accessible to everyone, and it should be available in all parts of the country, in all parts, even in the remote areas. And it should also be accessible. It should provide the quality in terms of creating employability. They should be job ready, and so many aspects are there. So inclusive, equitable, and quality education was the focus of this National Education Policy of 2020. And this is in line with the Sustainable Development Goal 4 of the United Nations, which is focused on education. So we need to follow this, and this is a long-term aspiration. So by 2040, we are expected to be one of the best education system in the world, second to none. And basically, the National Education Policy 2020 is also considered the first education policy of the 20th century, and it aims to address many growing development imperatives of our country. It also proposes revision and revamping of all aspects of education sector, and includes regulation and governance also, as Vice Chancellor was mentioning about the regulatory part. We need to have something more easier, faster. Policies have to be implemented and driven and deployed faster. So that's where it talks about light but tight regulations. So that is very important. So it doesn't say the regulations will be removed, but it will mentions that the regulations will be faster to implement, will be lighter. There will be more focus on self-governance and quality. So keeping and kind of regulations will depend upon the quality of the institutions, and that's how things will be speeded up. So let us see how it develops over a period of next 10 to 15 years. So 2040 is the time when the policy is supposed to be fully operational. And the policy also focuses a lot on traditions and Indian traditions and value systems. As you all know that India has been known for its education system during the time of Takshashila, Nalanda. Those were the times where a lot of foreign scholars also used to visit India, and there were a lot of innovations which were happening during those times. And India was known for being a multidisciplinary education hub. So now the same glory has to be brought back to India, and the policy focuses on making sure that the country becomes attractive for foreign students to come and study in this country. and take advantage of the culture and traditions of this particular country. So even the Indian students, they should know their culture, their traditions. And so the policy focus a lot on this. And also it emphasis on development of creative potential in everyone. So it talks about creativity, it talks about critical thinking. So the policy focuses on development of cognitive skills and also emotional skills and ethical skills among the students, so that they are holistically educated and they will be better citizens and better employees when they go to the organization. So here I start about a vision of the policy. So if you look at aspirations of the policy, it's to build a global best education system. So we want our education system to be, it's a very complex structure now with the UGC and 15 different regulatory bodies functioning under that. So it's very difficult with a lot of regulators and diversity of regulators. So diversity of expectations also. You look at the kind of reports which a normal deemed university sends. There are so many reports. You have to send it to the UGC, you have to send it to AICT, you have to send it to other councils. So always the educational institutions are always sending one or the other report. So it makes a lot of difficult for them. A lot of time is spent, quality time which could have been spent in education is going in terms of sending these reports, and that's where we need to look make it more simpler, have a single regulator at the helm, and then try to make the policies more standardized and easier to implement. So keeping that in mind, the new education policy has a provision of having a National Higher Education Regulatory Council at the helm, and then under that it will have several other councils. So there will be a National Higher Education Council, there will be a National Accreditation Council, there will be a General Education Council, and then there will be Grants Commission, National Grants Commission, and then all these bodies such as AICT and other bodies like Council of Architecture will be called as professional standard setting bodies. So this is where their role will be more in setting up the curriculum, setting up the kind of how the curriculum has to be deployed rather than regulation. So it is more of standard setting, quality of curriculum, quality of how it is deployed and how the outcomes are happening. So monitoring that. So keeping that in mind, the policy has a provision to make life easier for all the institutions. So it has to evolve over a period of next 10 to 15 years. As I mentioned earlier, the policy is focused on Indian ethos. So we need to be proud as Indians. We need to understand our culture. We need to understand our greatness. We were at a particular time called Vishwaguru. Now we have to reach that status again. So we need to make sure the brain drain stops, and most of the students who are now aspiring to go abroad needs to consider Indian education and need to stay back and study in India. So we need to bring that love for Indian ethos in the current generation. And then, of course, with all these efforts, we want to transform India into global knowledge power. So this has to happen by 2040. That's what is the aspiration. And definitely, there are a lot of efforts being put in this direction. And I'm sure we will be seeing a lot of positive results in the years to come. Of course, as rightly mentioned by the Vice Chancellor, the National Education Policy implementation has been initiated by the government of Karnataka, and it's one of the first states which has taken initiative in this direction, and most of the universities are implementing it. And that's where Karnataka has taken a lead role, and we are proud to be a part of this state. Again, when you look at the national education policy, it is held up on 5 pillars. So 5 pillars, what are they? What are the 5 pillars of the national education policy? So first one is access. So the access to education among the students in terms of getting good quality education in getting, it is basically reach, and then we have equity where it is in terms of providing same education to everyone. So it should not be that someone who is socially, the education policy calls those people who are not able to get the benefits of the education as socio-economically disadvantaged groups. So these are the groups which have issues in terms of being left out because of the economic disadvantage. So the policy talks about making sure that everyone gets an equal opportunity. So it talks about equity. It talks about access where students from different parts of the country, different remote locations should get an opportunity to study. And it talks about the quality. See, when you talk about quality, it is very important that we talk about employability. So many of the cases we have educational institutions providing degrees, but after completing the degrees, it is found that the graduates are not employable. They don't have the requisite skills to do well in their organization. So many times the organizations end up training the graduates again. So it's a rework for them. And end of the day, that has a lot of cost involved in it, lots of time. And end of the day, it leaves the major stakeholder, the industry, dissatisfied. So this has been vocally said by the industry from a long time. And educational institutions, some of them especially are taking it very seriously, and they are working in tandem with them. However, during an India Skills report recently in 2019, it was found that almost 47% of the STEM graduates are not employable. They are not meeting the requirements of the employer. So it's very important that private or the government educational institutions should work in making sure the graduates are employable and provide good quality education and make sure they are industry ready. When you look at the Indian education, the demographics, India has a very good advantage. We call it a demographic dividend. And almost 48.5 crore population will be in the age group of 15 to 35 in the age, by 2030. Now, considering this huge number of students and potential students, and it will be, and people who will be coming back to the education system again and again. So there is a lot of potential for the education sector to develop, and of course it has a lot of challenges as well, because there is a huge demand, and we don't have the supply to meet that. Even though we have 1013 universities, maybe we may need more universities with better quality education, and we have to ensure that the graduates are employable. Affordability is also one of the factors which is one of the pillars of national education policy. So we need to make sure adequate support mechanisms are in place to get the students scholarships from different sources so that they can support their education and get good education from good institutions. So it's very important that we need to create that kind of a facility also. And then accountability is with the institutions to deliver good education, deliver a good governance, make themselves and make sure they have integrity and transparency in all their activities. And that is where it's very important that we need to maintain that good governance system and effective governance system, which will give confidence to the stakeholders about the credibility. So the next aspect is about what the education policy calls the purpose of education, which is very important for us to understand. To develop good human beings capable of rational thought and action, possessing compassion and empathy, courage and resilience, scientific temper and creative imagination with sound ethical moorings and values. So in our education, we need to make sure all these are ingrained, because these are considered as the purpose of education. And when we are offering an educational offering, we need to make sure all these ingredients are part of our education system. And when they go back to the industry, when they join the industry, they should be in a position to showcase all these qualities, skills that are expected of them. So the policy aims at producing engaged, productive, and contributing citizens for building an equitable, inclusive, and plural society as envisaged by our constitution. So the policy is very clear. It wants inclusivity, it wants equity, and it also wants quality. So it's very important that we understand these aspects and as we go forward. We have seen some of the developments in the higher education sector. We have seen the growth of number of universities, the number of students, and we have seen that gross enrollment ratio, which was expected by the policy to be 50% by 2030. When you look at gross enrollment ratio of some of the other countries, which are like China, it is around 51% now. And if you look at US, it is around 88%. And South Korea, it's around 94%. And Indonesia, a neighboring country, we have 36%. So we need to really relook at our gross enrollment ratio, which is at 26.3%. We need to really make sure it grows and grows healthy and reaches 50% by 2030. Now, that is a big challenge in that. And apart from this challenge, there are several other challenges in the education ecosystem, which I'll be highlighting in the next few minutes. So when we study the National Education Policy 2020, Dr. Kasturi Rangan and his committee, after several years of deliberations with after visiting several institutions, several places, several villages, they have come out with certain challenges which are a part of the Indian higher education system. So one of the important aspect is a severely fragmented higher education system. So now we have a system where we have several kinds of universities. We have private universities. When you say private university, people may not understand what is private. So you have state private university, you have private deemed to be university, you have central universities, you have just state government universities. Then you have institutions of national importance. So there are so many categories of institutions. You have autonomous colleges linked to universities. So you have affiliating universities, which are many in the country. So all these have led to a very fragmented higher education system with very less scope for standardization, because each of them function in a different way. So it's very important that this has to be brought into some sort of simpler structure. That's wherein the policy mentioned about having only 3 types of institutions. One is basically there will be no demarcation as private or public. It will be called teaching university, research university, and autonomous degree granting colleges. So this is how the National Education Policy has brought in a simpler, suggested a simpler structure, which has a lot of challenges in days to come to implement. However, it is if implemented, it is definitely going to be very simple in terms of in terms of governance, in terms of regulations, and also for the students, it is easier for them also in terms of understanding the quality and the where they are going and what they can expect from it. So when you are talking about teaching universities, the expectation is more of teaching, maybe research as a component, but more of focus will be on teaching. When it comes to research universities, the focus will be more on research, and of course, teaching will be a part of the university activities, but there will be a lot of focus on publications, grants, patents, and so on. When it comes to the third category, autonomous degree granting colleges, there are several colleges in the country which have a lot of potential, which are running very nicely with a lot of innovative programs. However, these don't have the authority to grant a degree. So the policy talks about giving opportunities to good colleges with high accreditations, the opportunity to be autonomous degree granting colleges. And these colleges also have an option to integrate or come under the ambit of any of the teaching or research universities. or they themselves can, over a period of time, based on their size and number of students, they can also become universities themselves. So these are some of the provisions which they are brought in the policy to take care of this fragmented part. And again, the policy talks about one of the challenges is less emphasis on development of cognitive skills and basically learning outcomes. So far, the traditional education system has been focused on providing the degree with the aspiration that whatever education has been provided will be useful to the industry. But however, the national education policy now focuses on outcome-based education. Now, this particular aspect has already been initiated in the sciences side in the form of competency-based medical education. And I think in the dental council also has initiated this. So apart from that, in the technology side, when you look at NBA accreditation, it expects the colleges to also follow outcome-based education. So there is a requirement of defining the program outcomes, the course outcomes, and program educational objectives. And these are all focused on making sure that the outcomes are measured, they are measurable, and these outcomes are what the industry expects. So all these outcome-based education depends on, it is more of learner-centric, it is more on student-centric. So students have an option to study in the pathway which they want, and I end up in the career which they aspire. So a lot of focus is there on outcome-based education, which the national education policy highlights. I would not debate on whether outcome-based education is good or bad, but at the same time, it is good to understand that what we are delivering, whether it results in a very positive outcome or whether it the student has not been able to display those outcomes. So it's very good that there is a focus on outcomes. But at the same time, it has its own limitations and it has its own critics in terms of one of the challenges which the Indian education system faces is about rigid separation of disciplines. So with early specialization. So many of the cases we end up studying in a particular silos. So a commerce student may not study something which is there in arts, or a science student may not study what is there in commerce. So there is a rigid silos that commerce will study only commerce, science will study only science, engineering graduates will study only technology. So now this has to be broken, and we need to also look at offering the students with different options, different electives, so that they can study some of the things which they are interested, but not part of their education ecosystem. And then over a period of time, it may be possible that their existing discipline and interested area, they will definitely collaborate and come out with something, a good career. So to give a simple example, in our engineering college in Manipal, we have students who do projects on geopolitics and they are involved with the experts in the geopolitics area, and they work on various understanding geopolitics and then identifying technology interventions in that. So it's something where two disciplines are taken into consideration, and the student who is having interest in that particular area deploys his major interest in technology in the area of geopolitics. So these are some of the areas where the Western education system has been quite open in this matter, and they have been following this from quite some time. Whereas the Indian education system has been quite rigid. So once you complete your 10th standard and you join arts or commerce, it's very difficult for you to go back to science. So you're stranded. So it's not possible for the student to retract his decision and go back to any other stream. So it is something where flexibility has to be built into the system. So if someone is interested, they should be in a position to pursue that. And then, as I mentioned, there is a limited access to students from socio-economically disadvantaged areas, and of course, it is improving. Of course, they are being sensitized, they are being given opportunities. However, still a lot needs to be done in this area. There are many remote areas in the country which needs support. Students, meritorious students, they may be not having adequate funds to fund their education. We need them, and some of them have a disadvantage in terms of not having good competency in English. So there's a necessity that we need to look at some of the local languages to support this. So now, as you all know that as a part of the policy, this has been suggested, and even the regulators like AICT has come out with a directive that engineering colleges can offer some of the engineering courses in local languages. So around 11 languages have been identified. And in Karnataka itself, 4 colleges identified certain courses in different disciplines to be offered in the local language, Kannada. So this is happening, and there are critics to this as well, because of course there are challenges in this, because you need to have the study material, the entire literature in Kannada or in any other languages which the institutions would like to offer it. And at the same time, you need to also have trained faculties who can teach those subjects. So it is very, it's a kind of dichotomy where you there is a good in that, but at the same time there are a lot of challenges as well. And then, of course, we talk about the lack of qualified teachers. You always get kind of UGC directives that we should have faculties with PhD as teachers, and someone less than that cannot teach. So, of course, over a period of time, the number of PhDs and the PhD guides have increased in the country. However, there is again a limit. We need to increase this in terms of more PhD guides and more students enrolling in PhD. This has to improve, because, and at the same time, quality of PhDs also has to improve. So this can happen only with a lot of emphasis on autonomy and research. So basically, when I talk about autonomy, many of the institutions, especially affiliating colleges, they don't have autonomy in deploying the curriculum which they wish to. So there is a lot of constraints for them. They have to deploy whatever has been referred by the affiliating university. However, in today's paper, I saw an article where one of the colleges is offering additional courses apart from the recommended courses. So things are changing, and definitely the new education policy, these challenges also will slowly get mitigated. Of course, the next important aspect is progression of faculty and development of institutional leaders. So what the Kasturirangan committee found is a lot of colleges have faculties who are not very clear about their progression, how they will progress. There is no merit-based progression. And they also found that institutional leaders, whoever are leading the organization, they are the ones who motivate the institutions to grow, to develop and lead towards the vision of the country. So unless the leaders have adequate potential, adequate merit, then only it. So merit-based selection of leaders also becomes a part of this policy. And the policy also advocates that there should be a board of governors, and this board of governors will identify an expert empowered committee, which will then identify the leaders who can lead the institution. So basically, the policy says that leaders have to be chosen very selectively and merit-based, and they should be the ones who should be encouraging and motivating the institutions on its institutional development plan. So at the same time, for the faculties also, they should have adequate exposure in research, teaching, and administrative aspects, so that they can grow in their career. They can develop themselves, adequate opportunities of faculty development, so that they can, especially continual education, where they can develop themselves and then grow in their particular area. Also, there is less emphasis on research. As on today, research is a buzzword. Like if you talk about world rankings, you talk about NIRF, the National Institute of Ranking. Research is always a buzzword, and people say publications, citations per paper, and H index. These are the something terms which are very common across, and especially what is happening is. There are few institutions which are actually very focused on quality and want themselves to compare benchmark with some of the best in the world. So they focus on these areas and they make sure that their policies are in sync with what is expected by all these rankings and accreditations. So if you look at NAC accreditations also, there is a lot of focus on publications. There's a lot of focus on Scopus, Web of Science, PubMed publications. And also at the same time, it also focuses on citations and citations per faculty. So there is a lot of requirement for good publications, good research. And this can come only with the proper incentivization by the institutions and also proper funding. So that's where a lot of emphasis is required, which currently needs to be boosted up so that Indian research output improves. And this should also be encouraged across all disciplines. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the governance and leadership of higher education institution plays a lot of role in implementing various policies, quality of the education, coming out with new programs and new kind of projects. So that requires a lot of people with high skills and vision to be on the helm of affairs. Unless that happens, the institution may not grow. Another important aspect is we are also having a challenge of the regulatory system being too diverse and too many players and too many reporting. So end of the day, it may or may not be effective and it may not meet the requirements as expected. So we need to make sure that the regulatory system has to be light but tight as mentioned in the policy. And at the same time, someone may say that what will happen if a lot of fly-by-night operators come up. No, it is not going to happen because they will be driven out of the market. As you can see, a lot of engineering colleges may have closed down because there were no takers. Because unless you have quality, the market will not accept you. And over a period of time, even though if you have if the regulatory system has missed out on stopping them, the market will definitely stop them. So there is a important aspect is that we need to look at a more simpler regulatory system, which will be more effective and at the same time make sure the education is of the best quality. And one of the aspects which the policy highlights as a challenge is large affiliating universities, which has resulted in low standard of undergraduate education. So because of the high number of institutions and it requires a lot of control and a lot of monitoring, which may be very difficult in case of affiliating universities. So this system is being not recommended in this policy. So the policy talks about closing down affiliating universities and making sure the institutions autonomous. So basically, the affiliating structure is not at all recommended in the policy. Apart from this, I just had a look at what Deloitte had done in its survey in terms of challenges in the higher education system. And it had some very interesting findings, which are also in sync with the policy, in sync with what Kasturirangan committee also found. It says about growing divergence between curricula and market demands. So basically, it found that the curriculum is not meeting the industry requirements. So we are having an outdated curriculum, which is taught over a period of time, and then when the graduate reaches the market is no longer interested in that. So we need to make sure we understand the market, what are their needs, and come out with a up-to-date fresh curricula which will meet the requirements of the market and ensure that the graduates are employable. They have the requisite skills which the market requires. The next thing which it found out was about quality and quantity of research. So there is an increasing at one point of time there were so many predatory journals and people were publishing in that, and the research was getting published in actually a wrong place. So and then the visibility and other things were not there. It was only it was not benefiting anyone, neither the researcher nor the university nor the country. So over a period of time, this has been taken care by the regulatory authorities. The UGC has come out with the UGC Care, wherein it focuses on Scopus and Web of Science and PubMed, and make sure that the journals which are included are of good quality. And publications also, it is not just quantity, it's also quality which matters. So if I have to quote my own university, almost 52% of our publications are in Q1 or Q2 journals. So we encourage the faculties to publish only in Scopus index journals, and that too, in that also we make them to publish in Q1 and Q2, so that a large chunk of our publications are in good journals, and there is a good chance that over a period of time these articles become popular and get cited. So it also increases the opportunity of the article to get cited. So quality of the publication is very important. At the same time, we also need quantity for all these rankings, for getting some, for also encouraging the researcher to publish. So sometimes it may not be possible for the researchers to publish in high impact or higher quality journals. So they may have to start somewhere with Q3 or Q4 or the lower level journals. However, over a period of time, the focus should be on increasing the quality of the publications. So over a period of time, many of the private universities have understood this and they have taken up this as a focus, and many of their universities are doing well in this particular regard. The next challenge which Deloitte survey of deans suggested was or identified was faculty vacancies and skill gaps would dampen the quality of education. So it was found that a large number of institutions, the faculty, the sanctioned faculty and the recruited faculty, there was a gap. So the faculties on roll and whoever sanctioned. So there was a lot of vacancies which could be filled, and this happens even at the government institutions as well. So now what happens is because of the vacancies not being filled, the students are deprived of the services of those faculties. The students per faculty ratio increases, and then that automatically demotivates the faculty and also dampens the quality of education. Apart from that, the survey also found that many of the faculties needs to be skill updated. They need their skills to be updated. And this has to happen on a continual basis through continual education programs, through faculty development programs, and also they need to be in the industry, and also train the trainer programs also are very important. There is also a concept of faculty doing internship in the industry, where they go to the industry and be there for some time and understand the expectations of the industry, and they come back and then they train the students according. So there is a lot of importance that faculties who are part of our ecosystem needs to be trained on a regular basis to make sure they are useful to the organization, useful to the industry, and also this may lead to consultancies and research as well. The last part was lack of funding alternatives. So it was largely felt by the deans that a large chunk of the funding goes to government institutions, whereas the private institutions get limited funding. And that is one of the reasons why the research output is not so great. But However, nevertheless, in the later part of the presentation, I'll be informing how the present situation is. Even though there is a lack of funding in the private sector by the governmental agencies, limited funding, I would say, still the output is quite good compared to that, and there is a lot of potential if more funding comes up. So, based on the challenges, the Deloitte's survey had some interesting suggestions, which I would like to highlight as a part of this talk. It suggested creation of a broader education ecosystem. So it spoke about all the stakeholders, whether it's the regulators, the employers, the students, the faculties, all working together and creating a system where they understand each other's expectations and then work accordingly towards those expectations. So it spoke about a kind of, instead of working in silos and expecting that things will happen, they should work together and use the synergy of that in making sure the education is effective. So students will understand, will work with the educational institutions as well as the regulators and the industry. And of course, even the alumni can contribute there, where they can also come back to the institutions and also give their suggestions in terms of what can be improved and what can be brought up, what new need to be introduced. So the next suggestion was about bringing a balance between learning and job readiness, which has been a demand of the hour. Like it creates employability, it creates an opportunity for the person to join an organization. But unless they're learning what they had and it is not replenished or it is not up to the requirement of the industry, you may find that when they approach the industry has to incur a lot of expenses in training them again. So this is where the Deloitte survey felt that the graduates have to be trained at the universities to be job ready, and then they should be left to the industry. So for that, it's a extensive involvement with the industry is a must. A simple example, which I can quote from my own department, we have started a BCom business process service with the TCS. And this particular program, we have TCS as our partner in Knowledge Partner, where they train our faculties to deliver the subjects. And only the trained faculties are delivering those subjects. And those faculties also have an opportunity to visit the organization to understand their processes better. And they come back to the institution and they make sure the graduates understand all those requirements before they go to the industry. So this kind of approach may be required in more needs to be implemented on more and more, so that the graduates are employable and job ready. Apart from that, as I mentioned earlier, interdisciplinary learning was one of the suggestions which has come out of this survey as well, whereas it is also a part of our national education policy, which talks about multidisciplinary universities. So currently, it discourages the universities to be in a single or one or two disciplines. It expects the universities to be multidisciplinary. So keeping that in mind, interdisciplinary learning is very important because it gives you different dimensions, it gives you different opportunities, and it gives you a chance to understand the other discipline and then implement your own expertise in a particular discipline and try to synergize and try to come out with something new. So interdisciplinary learning has always been creating a holistic education for the student. And it is definitely one of the things which I can highlight again from my own personal experience here is we have introduced a program called Integrated Program in Management, where the students, after they are join the program after 12th, and they study the program for 5 years. First 3 years is the graduate part, and then next 2 years is the postgraduate part. By the time they complete the program, they get an MBA. But at the same time, the first 3 years of the program, what we do is if we give them training in different disciplines, not only in commerce and management. We also give them training in science, arts, several liberal arts. Then we talk about some initiation in engineering, in health sciences. So the candidate has grounding in every discipline to some extent to understand the nuances of those disciplines. And tomorrow, if the particular graduate goes to any industry, whether it's a pharmaceutical industry or whether it's a manufacturing industry, the person will have the necessary background to handle these kind of assignments. So this gives them a different, they become holistic in their understanding of the expectations of the industry, and gives them an edge over the other single discipline players in the market. So that's where interdisciplinary learning makes a lot of sense. Apart from that, we need to also look at online education. The suggestion of the survey is, since our gross enrollment ratio is very low, online education can be one of the ways we can improve our gross enrollment ratio. And the last part was about improving funding and cutting costs. So basically, we need to look at various avenues for funding the research, because just by sitting that government agencies are not giving or we are not able to get that, it doesn't mean we need to also look at creating seed money for applying for various grants, or look at international grants which are available, and also look at various alumni donors who can fund various high quality research. So there will be different ways in which funding can be explored, and that is a need of the hour. And also at the same time, we also need to look at where costs can be cut, so that where synergies can be used, and where things can be shared, and we can cut the cost. So of course, the policy also encourages sharing of resources. So definitely it will help in rationalizing the cost and making sure the institutions function with a more cost-effective manner. So I go to the next point of my talk, which is need for increased involvement of private sector. So as mentioned by the Vice Chancellor in his inaugural address, it is not right on our part to expect government to do everything. Government has its limitations. As you can see, only 3.3% of public expenditure on higher education of the GDP, 3.3% of the GDP is on expenditure in higher education. So this is a very less compared to some of the other countries like US, UK, China, which has more than 4%. Now, increasing it to 6% over a period of time may be the need of the hour. Of course, that is one way where you can improve the education system, and of course, bring in more funds into it. But at the same time, that may be also having its own limitation, considering the huge potential or demand for education in the country. So over the period of next 10 to 15 years, the country will have definitely a lot of demand for high quality education. And the growth from 3.3 to 6% may not be sufficient enough to cater to that requirement. So that's where there is a need for increasing privatization of higher education, which is very important at this point of time. If you look at the medical education, there are 46% of the colleges are privatized, 84% in dental, and almost a huge percentage in engineering, management, and pharmacy. So it's not that private players are playing a small role in the country's development. They have a huge role in the development of the country. So as you can see, most of them are contributing almost more than 50% of the country's education needs. So a large chunk of investment goes into this sector, and considering that it's a not-for-profit sector, investment of private players always has its own limitations. However, despite all those limitations and despite not being a not-for-profit sector, still we have a huge chunk of investment happening in this sector. So you can see that in the form of all these disciplines where the number percentages themselves indicate the increasing privatization. Apart from that, to quote my own university, which has also gone to set up off campuses in Mangalore and Bangalore as well as Jamshedpur, and also in Dubai and Malaysia. So we have universities like Manipal, and we have others like BITS and MIT, which has also gone offshore. So investment in an offshore campus has something a lot of difficult. It is requires a lot of investment in infrastructure, and something which Manipal has done very successfully. And it has invested not only in campuses of Manipal Academy of Higher Education. The Manipal group has invested in medical colleges, medical college in Nepal, and engineering and medical college in Sikkim, and a medical college in Antigua. So these are something where all these kind of investments, all these kind of initiatives are driven by the private players. So private players definitely have a lot of things to contribute to the economy, and this is very well evident from the way we have the private players have functioned, and the way they are growing in the last 2 to 3 decades. So yes, there are apprehensions that for-profit motive may be one of the aspirations of the private players. So, but then the quality of education, the kind of infrastructure what they provide, and the competitive environment itself will make sure there is checks and balances, so that these things it doesn't impact the student at the end of the day. Apart from that, I would like to highlight some contribution in research, which is quite surprising. When I went through that, I found that in terms of scholarly outputs, we have some of the private institutions like VIT, Manipal, or BITS, or Amrita, which are contributing huge number of scholarly outputs in the form of publications in Scopus Index journals. And these are on par with some of the IITs and IIMs which publish on a large scale. So considering that our scholarly output, I could quote VIT, which is publishing almost 4,000 articles in a year. So that is something quite phenomenal, and it is one of the highest if you compare it even with some of the government institutions. Apart from that, one of the metrics which is normally evaluated in research is how many of your articles are published in collaboration with international authors or co-authors. So this is one area where, except a couple of IIMs, even the IITs have not so many publications with. They have the limitation, but if you look at Manipal, it has almost 34% of its publications in collaboration with the international co-authors. Collaborations, international collaborations are being effectively handled, and many of the private players are working in this direction. And then, of course, citations count is also one of the important concepts, and here also parameters in research. And here also we find that one of the private players like VIT is having a huge number of citations for its publications, almost 4,000 citations in 2021. Field-weighted citation index is another metric which is used in research, and Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology has a field-weighted citation of 1.45, and BITS Pilani had 1.75 in last year. So these are the private institutions, and they have done very well in field-weighted citation index compared to some of the government players. And the last metric is in terms of publication in top 10% journals in percentile by site score. Here is one area where probably private players have not been able to reach the level what the government institutions have been performing. So that's where Bangalore has got almost 43%. And BITS is one of the private players, which is among the private players, it is around 22%. So if you look at research now, as the contribution of private players is definitely growing. The initiatives taken by the private players to publish in good journals is taking place, and I'm sure the investment made in terms of policies, in terms of putting a lot of emphasis on high quality research and also in good quantity will definitely yield good results in the next 4 to 5 years, where you can see a lot of private players doing well in this particular sector. Then comes contribution in innovation and entrepreneurship. Again, this is an area where, as you all know, that there is this ARIA rankings, which is very, very popular. And in the last 5 years, India has made considerable progress in this area. And if you look at the area of innovation and entrepreneurship, in Global Innovation Index, India has progressed from 81st position to 46th position. So that is it has come into the top 50. And also in Global Entrepreneurship Index, also it has improved its position to 68. So there is a lot of emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship. And definitely these are major instruments and tools which will help us to reach our goal of being a $5 trillion economy by 2025. And there is a huge potential for India to emerge as a global innovation hub. And with the youth of our country, if they contribute, especially in higher education institutions, they can play a crucial role in creating a sustainable innovation ecosystem. So we need to have more patents, we need to have more copyrights, we need to have more publications, and we need to have more innovation. So basically, more and more innovative ideas. And that requires some kind of motivation. So that's where the government has come up with this Atal ranking of institutions on innovation achievements, which is ARIA rankings. And in this rankings, if you see, out of 494 institutions, 373 institutions are private institutions. So that itself shows the kind of interest shown by the private players in innovation and entrepreneurship. And apart from that, out of 118 deemed universities, there are 80 deemed universities which are private. So this is one aspect which is very positive, and definitely over a period of time, this ranking will be more widely accepted by more and more Indian institutions. And also this ranking sets a direction for all these institutions to improve more, to make themselves globally competitive, and also be in the forefront of innovation. These rankings basically have two categories, public and private. But however, as you can see, the number of players in private sector has been quite encouraging. Apart from that, I also had a chance to look at data from a data intelligence firm called Traction, where out of 10 colleges which have their startups with most funding, 9 were government and 1 was a private player. So this is one area where we need to look at improving our performance as private players, because only 1 player out of 10, that is only 10%, I would say, has been able to make an impact in terms of getting funding for the startup. So of course, many of these institutions are in the nascent stage, and definitely a lot of potential is there. And definitely over a period of time, I'm sure more and more private players will feature in these startups, in this ranking. However, I would say, just want to highlight here that out of 4,900 startups, almost 86% of these startups are from government funded institutions, and only 14% are from private. So that is where is a huge potential for us to develop and increase more startups and make sure these startups get good funding, so that we have more and more entrepreneurs created in the campus. So entrepreneurship and innovation is definitely the focus of most of the private institutions for a period, because it not only, as mentioned by the Vice Chancellor in his inaugural speech, it is a avenue for employment creation. So it gives you an opportunity to create employment. At the same time, you create innovations which support the society, which supports the country, and makes the country proud and makes it competitive. So we need a lot of innovation, we need a lot of entrepreneurship, and definitely private players have a lot of things to contribute in this. So these are few of my concluding remarks, which I leave at the part as a concluding part of my presentation. As we went through the entire presentation, you saw that there is a lot of demand and lot of opportunities, and the supply is limited, and we need to increase the supply. So gap between talent, demand, and supply will persist. So we need to make sure the graduates who come out of our institutions meet the requirements of the industry and meet the talent demand, and that will mean a lot of initiatives in training the faculty, in revamping the curriculums, and making sure we understand the stakeholder requirements very clearly. The next thing is educational institutions still continue to operate in silos, so we need more and more collaborations. We need more vibrant environment in terms of collaborating with each other and coming out with good innovative publications, and also coming out with various projects which can benefit the country. Of course, the national education policy tries to bridge this gap. It talks about collaborations, it talks about networking, it talks about government and private working together. Definitely, we hope that the policy will, over the period of time, will bring in more and more vibrancy in this matter, and make sure that the benefit of this goes to the institutions. Of course, there is a need for, one is more outcome-based education, personalized and dynamic methods of learning, which again, the policy talks about a lot of autonomy to the faculty to develop their pedagogies, to develop their curriculum. Definitely, there will be a lot of personal satisfaction to the faculties when they start developing curriculums which they have in mind, they want to actually teach. And definitely in a lot of streams where this is where the regulators are not given some kind of autonomy, definitely this will be a very good opportunities for the faculty to showcase their talents. And of course, there is a need for better equipped faculty. During the pandemic, we have all experienced that online education is something which needs a lot of training. And then of course, people over a period has got adjusted to this, and they have now become better equipped in handling online education. But over a period of time, we need to look at all kind of different eventualities and make sure the faculties are better equipped to handle all kind of future requirements, and also all kind of technologies which are required to teach. So they need to be adapted to the latest developments in the market. And then of course, we need to also look at various ways of evaluating our students, and we need to look beyond the conventional ways and see how best we can evaluate the students and make them perform better in the market. And of course, evaluation of faculties also needs to be looked into. We have performance management system, so we need to look at whether the metrics which we used in performance management system are in sync with what is the requirement of the education sector, and is it contributing to better performance, better impact performance. The last part, and the next one is about funding. Of course, there is a need for funding. It's very well. We need to explore various avenues and make sure we have collaborations in place. We have seed funding, and we also look at alumni and sponsorship, so that we can look at various ways projects can be funded. And that requires also innovative thinking, needs to look at various eventualities and come out with some kind of innovative models. And of course, there is a need for broader and more collaborative coalition, which plugs the existing gaps and drive reforms. This is basically in terms of all the stakeholders needing to work in sync to meet the requirements of the education sector, because you cannot work in silos. The accreditation bodies, the regulatory bodies, the institutions, the industry, and the students all needs to be a part, and alumni all needs to be a part of this coalition, where they give their inputs, they try to bridge the existing gaps, and also make sure they identify what reforms can be brought in the higher education sector. So we need a concerted effort by all the stakeholders to drive the requirements of the national education policy. And one of the things which I would like to leave at the end of this as a concluding remark is the kind of collaborations which the policy talks about and tries to advocate. We as MAHE has always done that in terms of if in the 1950s, Dr. T.M.A. Pai brought in the public-private partnership, where Kasturba Medical College was brought under this particular partnership, and that still continues over the years, and it is very successful and continuing. And then in the last year, in 2020, we had the first private-private partnership, where we partnered with the Tatas in Jamshedpur and come out with a medical college there. So these are kind of examples where somewhere we have worked towards the guidelines of the national education policy, and also made sure that collaborations not only are in private or public-private, we have both the kind of collaborations with us, which support the education sector. And definitely these collaborations have contributed to the development of those regions. So definitely, as you can see, private players have a lot of potential to play in the education sector, and there's no doubt about it. And there's a lot of opportunities in the coming years which can be explored, and with the guidelines of the national education policy, which will evolve over the years. Definitely, I'm sure the private players will have a lot of role to play in the development of the country. So I conclude with one more quote by our leader, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Every individual has a right to an education that will enable him to develop his faculties and live a full human life. So with this concluding words from a quote from Maulana Azad, I thank Nitte for giving me an opportunity to talk to all of you. And I'm open to any questions if there are any.
Thank you, sir. So we have 2 questions from the audience. Yeah. According to the new education policy 2020, there is an emphasis on no rigid separation between academic streams and extracurricular activities in schools. How can we streamline or inculcate these into professional courses as well?
Yeah, as far as professional education is concerned, currently we have various regulatory bodies like DCI, NMC, and Nursing Council, which have come out with their own competency-based curriculums. But at the same time, there is limited options there, where you can bring in some other programs which can be brought in by the universities or the private players as an add-on. But then they already have a prescribed curriculum which the university, which the students have to take. Whereas there is, of course, they have given some opportunities where we can bring in some innovation in pedagogies and other things. But considering engineering education, yes, you can definitely look at bringing in more open electives, as I mentioned earlier, where students, if they want to study geopolitics, if they want to study some subjects in commerce, they want to study something in the health sciences side, then they should be given an opportunity. See, the one example I can say is several of our innovation projects are coming from the dental students. So they collaborate extensively with the engineering students, and they come out with several innovative projects where the technical aspects is taken care by the engineer, and the technical aspects of the treatment or the equipment or whatever they are suggesting is taken care by the dental. So and then of course sometimes they bring in management people to take care of the commercial part of it, how to commercialize that particular niche. So these kind of open electives will sensitize them on the possibilities of how they can look at various other sectors and try to use their technical skills in that. So engineering management programs like what I am running in my department, like BBA, BCom, we have also inculcated art appreciation, film appreciation, languages, also as a part of their open electives, where they get an opportunity to study those as a part of their curriculum. So when it comes to some of the educations, the regulators may have to bring in some more flexibility where this can be incorporated. However, in engineering, it has already been initiated and many of the colleges are doing it. And I'm sure with days to come, more and more such electives will be offered. Because there is an option also to offer major electives and minor electives. So you can major in mechanical engineering and have a minor in financial management. That also can be a possibility.
Thank you, sir. The next question. Why is autonomy being looked upon as an economic opportunity more than curricular autonomy? Are the multiple statutory bodies, councils to blame? Will NEP liberate Indian curriculum?
This is quite a complex question. This can only be answered with the time, because at this point of time, we have not seen any changes in the regulatory bodies as given by the National Education Policy, which talks about a single regulatory council and then professional standard setting bodies and all those structures. So unless that structure comes into place and we have that system in place, then possibly we may have an opportunity to understand what kind of liberties will be given to the institutions to run their programs. But as of today, if you look at deemed to be universities, especially for their programs, they have some kind of autonomy where they can design their curriculum and offer. Of course, these are basically in the engineering and non-health sciences programs. But they have some kind of opportunity to innovate in those areas. So we can begin with those areas where it is possible to innovate, and hope that over a period of time there is a change in this system, and there will be more flexibility given in terms of innovating curriculum in other areas also. But as I see, the NEP is an opportunity for us to innovate in the curriculum. Economics part definitely may be there, but the focus is more on giving the faculty more opportunity to improve the subjects or give a curriculum which is more interesting for the students and which they are teaching, how they can teach it better. So it's giving more opportunities for the faculties to involve. One of the important things about this policy is it talks about involvement of all faculties in curriculum development. It doesn't say that curriculum has to be developed by a group of faculties and then implemented by everyone. It says you should have curriculum development committees, groups, which will contribute to the improvement in the curriculum. So faculties will have an opportunity to design what they want to teach. And this is something which the policy talks about. Deemed universities have certain advantages in that, where they can bring in these kind of changes. Of course, affiliating universities, state and central universities may have limited reach in that.
Thank you, sir. So as we've come to the end, I now call upon Professor Dr. Sriniketan to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Madam. Respected Vice Chancellor of the Nitte Deemed University, Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, sir. Guest speaker of the day, Dr. Sandeep Shenoy. Dean of our dental school, Dr. Shenoy. Coordinator of the program, Dr. Nitte. Members of the council, invitees, student friends, ladies and gentlemen. We had a nice celebration of the National Education Day. Today we had a talk by Dr. Sandeep Shenoy. First of all, on behalf of the university, I must thank him for accepting our invitation and giving an insight of how the private universities are contributing to the higher education ecosystem. Our Vice Chancellor is always in the front to organize such activities. Although it is a direction of the Minister of Education, Government of India, we feel it is our honor, it is our duty to commemorate the day in honor of our first Education Minister, Maulana Azad. Of course, our Vice Chancellor mentioned that that it is a new education policy is very highly ambitious and it is having a lot of challenges. And that is what our speaker today has brought out in his speech, in his presentation, how this gap can be brought about by bringing these private universities. He gave us a lot of examples of how private universities are today contributing to higher education research and so on. Sir, on behalf of the Nitte Deemed University, on my personal behalf, I thank first our guest speaker, Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, for providing us an insight into how the private universities plays a role and future also how they will play a more role in promoting our Indian higher education system, providing higher research output and creating the necessary ecosystem for what we call as the innovation and entrepreneurship in higher education. Thank you very much, sir. Our Vice Chancellor is always at the forefront to organize such activities. And on behalf of the Innovation Council, I must thank our Chancellor, Dr. Sri Vinay sir, other management committee members, our registrar and other senior functionaries of the university for supporting the activities of this Innovation Council. I am very, very happy that dental school has taken up this responsibility of organizing today's activity. Sir, on behalf of the University and Innovation Council, I must thank personally our Dean and Principal of MAHE Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences, Dr. Nayak sir, for providing the welcome address and also supporting Dr. Nitte in organizing this event. Thank you very much, sir. I also personally thank Dr. Nitte for taking this responsibility and conducting this event in a nice manner. Madam, I thank you on behalf of the university and the Innovation Council. I thank all the people who attended, student friends, our members of the council, and all people who supported the council and Dr. Nitte in organizing this event in a successful manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So as we have come to the end of the program, I would like to thank once again to all the audience for joining us. And thank you, Sandeep sir, for accepting our invitation and delivering a very informative talk to all of us. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Pardon my personal indulgence. I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank Dr. Sandeep Shenoy, a very dear friend of mine, for accepting our invitation and delivering this lovely lecture on this National Education Day. Thank you very much, Sandeep, and we are really, really grateful to you and for the valuable time that you have spent with us.
Thank you.
And I will ensure that the memento reaches your house in Mangalore. That will be easier for me rather than send it across to Manipal. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Permit me to do so. We may need a residential address, which I will get you over the phone.
Yes, sir. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much once again. God bless. Thank you.